It is the end, and the moment has not been prepared for. On screen, Ace hasn't done her homework, and behind the scenes, the show's fate will be sealed one way or another. As our journey into the alternate timeline comes to an end with the fourth and final story of the season, we're going to need to start to get very creative with casting decisions, we're going to need to do a few last-minute rewrites, and more than anything else, we're going to need the BBC to show a lot more Star Trek. When a show's in crisis, when a planet's in need, Earth Aid to the rescue. More than before, I really want to try and stick to the rules as closely as possible. The Earth Aid story we're going to work through will be the visual version of the 4-part Big Finish story. It's to be done on a 1990 budget, with 1990 technology, and 1990, well, pretty much 1990 everything. That's not to say I don't plan to stretch a few things, because when listening to this again, admittedly for the first time since its release in 2011, I had various brainwaves about just how it could be done, and possibly even done well. Whilst stories like Animal would have needed some very specialised scenes and props, I'm still trying to imagine the plant attacks, but I think I've got my head around them now. Earth Aid has the potential to do well if, rather than concentrating on the future of the show, it actually learns a few things from its past and takes a few sneaky ideas from Big Finish's box of tricks. Overview-wise, once again, this is 100% classic series Doctor Who. We run up and down the corridors of 2 spaceships. We've got aliens who aren't all they seem, and the 7th Doctor has set up the story before we even join it. There's a mystery to solve, peril for all, and some damn fine guest roles. I know I'm not supposed to judge the story based on the Big Finish acting and casting, but just as a side note, Patterson Joseph and Ingrid Oliver are really absolutely amazing in the audio release. And, unlike the slightly slower pace of the first 2 stories, this one absolutely rattles along. Part 4 squeezes nearly 30 scenes into its 30-ish minute runtime, which means that finding breathing space to get all 4 of them into the necessary 24 or 25 minute window, well, that's going to be a challenge. So, time to stretch the rules just ever so slightly, and also with vaguely recent precedent. Just as JNT pleaded with the BBC to allow Part 14 of Trial of a Time Lord to be given a special 30-minute slot, as this is potentially the last ever Doctor Who to be made, whoever is sitting in that chair would, I feel, be very justified in going to the top dogs at the BBC and asking for that to be granted one last time. The story, after all, isn't completely standalone, as it picks up bits from the rest of the season and needs to bring them to a satisfactory close. To strengthen the case, the producer will point to 2 very important aspects of the production. Firstly, by bringing the Metatraxi into the story, it's saving money, because it can reuse the creature suits made for Crime of the Century. And secondly, well, yes, here's the big stretch, but one I'll justify, it's going to be designed, planned, and coordinated alongside the 3rd season of Red Dwarf. Think this is impossible? Earth Aid is almost like a straight-laced version of Red Dwarf, and with the sitcom getting a makeover for its 3rd season, this could potentially be a huge money saver for both of them, as the BBC have possibly the single most important person in British science fiction working for them. Step forward the potential saviour of the series, Mr. Mike Tucker. In all seriousness, it's amazing this didn't happen, because the more I look at the requirements for the story, the more I can see how it would work. Most of the story is set on 2 spaceships, and, more importantly, there isn't really anything specific that the interiors need to provide other than flight deck type stuff, corridors, and a sickbay. So for the interiors, there would be 2 lots of modular sets, so that there was variety in the corridors and camera angles, which would then be given a lick of paint each and potentially used by Red Dwarf. Paint one so it's light and tech-orientated, paint the other so it's older-looking and more functional, and then swap the colour schemes over, change the set dressings around, and presto! 4 spaceships for the price of 2 and a bit at most. Then there are the space shots. Mike Tucker really knows his model work, and Earth-Aid needs brief shots of 3 different types of ship seen in space. How about we apply the same sort of thinking to the design of the ships? Turn them into a set of plug-and-shoot model kits, so that you can reassemble the pieces to make them into a wide variety of ships. Be even more cunning, and if you make each module as 2 halves, so that it looks like one ship if shot from one side, but looks completely different if shot from the other, then you start to build up a fairly decent array of ships that can be used. Season 2 of Red Dwarf featured the episode Stasis Leak, which had a shower set built for it. And Earth-Aid just so happens to need a brief sequence set in a spaceship shower. You could probably make the first 2 episodes of Earth-Aid entirely on the principle of shared or stock sets. After all, in 1970, Doctor Who tag-teamed with Doomwatch to share the cost of sets. So, it could theoretically happen again. Speaking of share and share alike, in 1990 the BBC had just started showing the first episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, and America was on Season 3. Now, I'm not saying that the BBC should directly copy anything from TNG, but given that Ace borrows certain dialogue from that show's characters, I see no reason why the uniforms seen on screen shouldn't take inspiration from America. Plus, with Doctor Who conventions being big in the States, I'm certain the production team could easily have brought back some Season 3 episodes with them on tape to take notes from. After all, UK audiences probably wouldn't see those for another 2 years. Okay, more stretching of the rules again, but one I feel that could be negotiated. This would relate to background extras. On audio, it doesn't really matter that on the bridge of one ship, there appear to be only 2 characters running the ship alongside Captain Ace. On television, though, this might have looked slightly sparse. Therefore, a few extras sitting at control panels and generally looking busy would be useful. And yet again, there's a possible cost-cutting measure. The Metatraxi and the Grubs never appear on the ship's bridge, and even more importantly, the Metatraxi are alien and the crew are human. So for the first recording block, all the extras are sitting around pressing buttons on the flight deck. Then in the second recording block, they put their Metatraxi heads on and hang around on the second ship. Yes, this is the big finish trick of other parts are played by members of the company. We're also quite lucky that the script never gives any real indication of what the Grubs look like. I'm not saying they should go for as primitive as the bubble wrap Wirren from the Ark in Space, but for the function they perform in the story, they can actually be pretty basic in their design. Where the story gets a bit more awkward on screen is in parts 3 and 4. They both need the grain silo, but the more I think of it, the more I'm convinced that given the frantic pace of the story, they wouldn't need to do long lingering shots of the millions of tons of grain. An initial wide shot of some sort, and then the rest done in close-up would probably get around things. Then, in part 4, we need the Metatraxi homeworld and its arena. Most of the homeworld bits are, let's face it, just wandering around on a planet. So, for a final bit of bending of the rules, as it stands, Season 27 is not like a standard season of Doctor Who. It has plot strands right the way through it, reoccurring characters, and the potential for sharing a budget with other shows. So let's go with one more resource sharing. In The Crime of the Century, we'd already shot a whole load of Metatraxi on location in Wales. Would it really be so unreasonable to fit in some recording during that time for the Metatraxi on their homeworld? Earth-Aid really has the potential to show just how a really fun Doctor Who story can be made with some very cunning shortcuts. And one scene that, oh okay, they redubbed the ending of Survival, so I'm going to cheat as well again. I'm going to suggest replacing the very last scene of Earth-Aid to really tie the 4 stories together. With so much of Season 27 featuring plots or elements of plots that are bootstrapped paradoxes, and the Doctor setting things up off screen, I think the final scene should really be a massive nod to the camera that the show knew it hadn't given all the background. To save building the TARDIS control room for the final scene of Earth-Aid, well, what little of it remained in storage anyway, I would have had the three regulars back on one of the ships and gently wandering along the corridor towards the police box. As we see the three friends happily heading back to their home, Rain would ask just exactly how Ace wound up as the captain of a spaceship. The Doctor would stop and looked horrified, suddenly realizing that he'd forgotten something important. Ace would then chime in about how it was all very convenient that she and Rain had been enrolled at the university as students, and that Bambera had been given the heads up. And the Doctor would look so very guiltily at his shoes. "You did go back and set it all up, right, Professor?" And that's when they race to the police box, hastily running through all the things they still need to get done for the season not to break the web of time. But I won't tell you my idea for the last line. Because before I even get to that, and in the spirit of Animal, I need to say that this version of Season 27 has just been too much to work. Which means that for the final part of this trip to an alternate 1990, I need to ask the question, will the real Season 27 please stand up?